Hey guys, tonight we head west, dusty, tired, and unwashed into a world where personal hygiene was less a daily ritual and more of an optional adventure. Picture it the 1870s, somewhere near a sun-blasted trail, cutting across New Mexico. Your boots full of sand, your shirt stuck to your back with sweat, and the nearest bar of soap, possibly 1,000 miles away, or just non-existent. Your skin itches. Your scalp feels like it's been varnished with dust, and your only source of water is the same muddy creek that a herd of cattle just relieved themselves in upstream. Welcome to the Wild West. It's not the clean-shaven, slow-motion Hollywood fantasy. It's gritty, grimy, and if we're being honest, kind of disgusting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots squelch as you step off the trail. Not from mud would be a luxury, but from the accumulated cocktail of sweat foot fungus and whatever unholy substances your socks absorbed during the 2-day ride. You haven't bathed since last week. You think maybe the week before. Time blurs when hygiene isn't a priority. You're not alone in your stench. The men around you smell like old bacon left in the sun. The women, they're doing their best, but the options are limited. Everyone's noses have simply adapted or given up. Your tent smells like a combination of damp wool, unwashed leather, and something vaguely resembling burnt meat. There's no deodorant. There's no daily shower. There's no gentle, lavender-scented hand soap waiting to save the day. There's only a tin cup, a sloshing canteen, and the eternal hope that a dust storm might just blow away the worst of your scent. Even your horse smells better than you. You wipe your face with a bandana that's absorbed more dirt than it's repelled. A nearby cowboy offers you a sip from his canteen. You decline. Not because you're polite, but because you watched him spit chewing tobacco into it earlier. Historians often glorify the Old West as a time of rugged independence and honor. But what they don't always mention is how much it reeked, not just from people, but from the world around them. Streets caked in horse manure, outhouses that were basically glorified holes in the ground, sweat-soaked shirts worn for weeks at a time, skin rarely scrubbed clean, hands that went from horse reins to dinner plates without ever touching water. Even when water was available, it wasn't always safe or even remotely clean. Wells could run dry. Rivers could be tainted by upstream carcasses or runoff. And in mining towns or remote ranches, the nearest wash basin might be a barrel of stale rainwater being used by everyone in the area. One at a time. No soap. No rinse between turns. But here's the thing you start to adjust. Your nose gets bored. Your standards drop like a rock down a well. That man across from you who 2 weeks ago would have triggered a gag reflex now just smells like Tuesday. You both laugh about it. Or you would if your teeth didn't hurt every time you smiled. Speaking of which, don't look in the mirror. Not that you have one. But if you did, you'd probably see a face crusted with grit, eyes ringed in fatigue, and a layer of tan that's really just grime masquerading as color. And yet, you survive. Somehow. There's something oddly calming about the routine. Wake, ride, eat, sweat, swear, sleep, repeat. No one expects you to be clean. No one judges your smell, and you don't judge theirs. Because you'd go insane if you did. Sometimes when the stars come out and the fire crackles low, you strip off your boots and just sit. Feet bare air, finally cooling. It's not a bath, but it's something. You wipe your face with the inside of your sleeve. You spit to the side, careful not to hit your hat. And you feel, if not clean, then at least less filthy. Someone tells a joke about a man who bathed twice a year, whether he needed it or not. Everyone laughs, not because it's a great joke, but because it's true. A few feet away, a man picks lice out of his beard and flicks them into the fire. He doesn't flinch. Neither do you. The Old West didn't apologize for its dirt. It didn't have to. It wore grime like a badge of survival, and in a world where the nearest doctor was 50 miles away and carried the same rusty tools he used for amputations and dentistry, a little stink was the least of your worries. So you lean back, boots off, bandana down, and watch the sparks rise into the night. You're tired. You're itchy. You probably smell like something that crawled out of a saloon drain. But here in this moment, you fit right in. You wake up stiff. The canvas of your bedroll is damp from your own sweat, the wool blanket crusted at the corners from last night's dust storm. The fire's gone out. The horses are already stomping their hooves, and someone's frying salt pork nearby, though you could swear the smell is coming from yourself. Welcome to another day in the Wild West. You blink grit from your eyelashes and stretch your arms, muscles creaking like wagon wheels. A fly lands on your lip. You don't even bother swatting it anymore. And before you can even yawn, you're already thinking the unthinkable, a bath. But where? There's a stream nearby, sure, but the cattle have been crossing it for days. The water's thick and brown, more soup than salvation. If you're lucky, you might find a shallow spot that hasn't been trampled into sludge. If you're really lucky, the sun will warm it just enough not to freeze your bones. But chances are, if you manage to submerge yourself in that creek, you'll crawl out dirtier than when you went in, just better hydrated. Clean water in the American frontier was a currency more valuable than gold, especially in summer. Towns that sprang up overnight around railroads or mines often had no infrastructure, no wells, no pumps, no reliable source at all. In some settlements, you'd find entire families surviving off rainwater collected in barrels lined with leaves and algae. On good days, it tasted like wet pine. On bad ones, it tasted like dead raccoon. And they drank it anyway. Bathing, when it happened at all, was a communal affair. Not romantic, not relaxing, and certainly not sanitary. If a town had a public bathhouse, it was usually built with a single goal: profit. For a few cents, you'd get access to a tub filled with warm water that had already been used by 3 or 4 other people that morning. You'd lower yourself into that murky broth, hoping you didn't catch something that itched, bit, or boiled later. And if you were poor, you didn't bathe. Simple as that. Soap, too, was a luxury. Store-bought soap bars came from back east and cost more than most folks made in a day. So instead, settlers made their own, usually with lye animal fat and something vaguely aromatic, like pine resin or leftover coffee grounds. The result was a greasy gray brick that smelled like bacon gone bad and felt like rubbing your skin with a cheese grater. Not that it stopped anyone. If you were lucky, you might get to use homemade soap once a month, maybe during Sunday wash, if water was plentiful, or during a holiday, or after someone died and you had to look presentable. The rest of the time you just wiped yourself down with a cloth and hoped no one got too close. And what counted as a bath was flexible. A quick rinse from a canteen, a splash in a horse trough when no one was looking, a bucket of water dumped over your head while standing barefoot in the yard. Some folks went weeks without more than a moist rag under the arms. One cowboy once claimed to bathe every spring whether he needed it or not. People laughed. He was dead serious. The problem wasn't just availability, it was also belief. You see, in the 1800s, not everyone thought bathing was healthy. Yes, really. Some people believed that too much bathing weakened the body or opened your skin to miasmas, bad airs, thought to cause disease. Doctors, still fumbling in the dark before germ theory caught on, warned patients against frequent washing, especially with hot water, which they thought could cause fainting hysteria or even death. Even in cities like San Francisco, it wasn't uncommon for people to sponge themselves off once a week and call it a win. So, out on the prairie or deep in the desert, you were lucky if you had a bucket and didn't have to share it with a mule. Let's say you did find a stream. Let's say the water's clean enough, the weather warm enough, and you have 5 uninterrupted minutes without bandits or bears or neighbors wandering past. You strip down, you step in, and then you realize 2 things. 1, the water is ice. 2, your skin has forgotten what sensation feels like. You grit your teeth and splash water over yourself. Your hands are shaking. You scrub under your arms, your neck, your chest. Dirt cakes off like it's been glued to you for months because it has. You think briefly about shampoo, about warm water, about conditioner. Then you snort. That fantasy's for people with indoor plumbing. And Paris. You dunk your head. The shock makes you curse out loud. You forget to worry about who hears you, because at that moment, as the freezing water runs down your back, you feel almost human, almost, until you look downstream and see two cattle standing belly deep, watching you with the same dull stare they give everything else. You sigh, climb out, grab your one clean shirt, which is only clean because it hasn't been worn yet this week. You wring out your hair, tie it back, and start walking. By the time you reach camp, you're dusty again. But for a few precious minutes, you were clean. Sort of. Historians still argue whether the average settler bathed more than once a month. Some say yes, especially those near rivers or lakes. Others claim most people went whole seasons without a proper wash. Diaries from the time are vague, probably because the writers were too ashamed to admit how bad they smelled. But one thing's for sure, if you're dreaming of a long, luxurious soak in a clawfoot tub filled with scented bubbles, don't pack your bags for the Wild West. You'd be the cleanest corpse they ever buried. And remember, everybody else stank too. That's the secret. The filth became invisible through repetition. The same way you stop noticing the hum of flies after a few hours, or the constant creak of the wagon wheels, or the low-level fear of infection, starvation, or a snake bite to the thigh. Hygiene wasn't just a luxury. It was a miracle. You didn't chase it. You celebrated it when it came. And then you returned to the dust, to the grime, to the creaky bedroll, and the smoky shirt, and the sour boots that hadn't dried since last fall. Because that was life in the Wild West. And if you survived it long enough, you just might stop noticing the smell. You're riding into town now, your legs sore from a day on horseback, your face stiff with dried sweat, your shirt clinging in all the wrong places. The town's nothing more than a few wooden buildings sagging under the weight of dust and heat. There's a saloon, a general store, and a building that at first glance you mistake for a chapel. It's not. It's a bathhouse. You blink at it like it's a mirage, but no, there's steam curling from the chimney and a creaky sign swinging over the door that reads, simply, Baths, 10C. You reach for your coin pouch, and then you remember you're broke. You sigh and dismount, dust trailing off your pants in a sad little cloud. You walk past the bathhouse slowly, catching the faint scent of hot iron and old soap. Maybe if you help unload the delivery wagon tomorrow, the owner will let you sneak in. Maybe, or maybe not. You settle for wiping your face with the inside of your shirt again and head to the saloon instead. Inside, the air is thick with sweat smoke and the sweet sour tang of spilled whiskey. The bartender's wiping mugs with a cloth so dirty it probably has its own opinions about politics. You take a seat. A man 2 stools down smells like he's been dead for a week and just hasn't realized it yet. You nod politely. He nods back. It's here that you overhear a conversation about soap. Yes, soap. Apparently, a shipment just came in from St. Louis. Real soap. Scented. Packaged. Imported. Fancy. A woman at the corner table says she bought 2 bars and plans to use one for the baby and save the other for Easter and emergencies. You chuckle into your drink. Soap as a precious resource, absolutely. Because in the Wild West, most soap wasn't pleasant. It was harsh, lye-heavy, and homemade by boiling animal fat with ashes until it solidified into a crumbly slab that burned if left on your skin too long. The smell, somewhere between bacon grease and regret. But if you had money or access to a good general store, you could find toilet soap from back east wrapped in paper, with words like lavender or rosewater on the label. It didn't always smell good, but it smelled different, and that alone made it a luxury. Even so, using soap regularly meant you were either wealthy, obsessed with cleanliness, or preparing to be buried. Let's talk methods now, because even if you had soap and water, there was still the question of what to do with them. You didn't exactly have a tiled bathroom waiting. Instead, people used a variety of methods that ranged from clever to downright miserable. Some families kept a wash tub near the fireplace and filled it with warmed rainwater. The entire family would use it in order of age and status. Father first, then mother, then children, then maybe the baby. By the time the youngest got in the water, looked like stew and smelled worse. In towns with bathhouses, you'd rent a tub for 10 cents or less, sometimes with a towel included, though towel might mean a scrap of burlap. You'd strip down hand over your clothes, which would also be cleaned by being beaten against rocks or dunked in lye, and lower yourself into the water already used by others if you weren't first in line. Then there were stream baths. These were simple. Find a creek, undress, and splash. But creeks weren't always available, or warm, or clean. So sometimes you'd settle for a dry rub, taking a cloth or handful of grass and wiping the worst of the dirt from your skin. It didn't clean you, but it felt better than nothing. Sort of. Now, about hair. Forget shampoo. Forget conditioner. Forget those fancy little brushes that make your scalp tingle. You had a comb, maybe, and a bottle of hair oil, usually something made with animal fat, pine resin, or bear grease. It didn't make you smell good, but it helped hold your hair in place and kept it from becoming one giant knot. People rarely washed their hair, not just because of the lack of water, but because they believed it would weaken their roots or make them sick. Historians still argue whether the average woman of the 1870s washed her hair more than once every few months. Men, they just wore hats. Cowboys in particular swore by a system of brushing, oiling, and hiding. A hat kept the dust out the hair down and the sun off your scalp. If your head itched, you scratched it. If it got too greasy, you cut it. Problem solved. Or postponed. You finish your drink and head outside just in time to see someone dump a bucket of gray water into the street. It steams slightly as it splashes onto the dirt. Bits of soap float in it. You sigh and imagine diving into that bucket head first. It's tempting, but you keep walking. Back at your camp, you stare at your canteen. There's about half a pint left. You could drink it, or you could use it to scrub your hands. You pour a little into your palm and rub vigorously the dust, forming a grimy paste that rolls off like clay. It feels good, cooling, satisfying. You wipe your hands on your pants. They're already stained. You lie back against your saddle and close your eyes. The wind rustles the tall grass. Somewhere a dog barks once. You're not clean, not even close, but you're cleaner. And out here, that counts for something. Because hygiene in the Wild West was never about being pristine. It was about managing the grime. It was about minimizing the stench. It was about coping, not curing. And everyone did it. You weren't gross. You were normal. That man with the unwashed beard and shirt stiff from 3 months of use. Normal. The woman who cleaned her face with rose water but hadn't washed her feet since the railroad opened. Also normal. The child running barefoot through town, his legs streaked with soot and dust, his hair full of hay and chewing gum. Healthiest kid on the block. You look up at the stars. You wonder what they'd think, those clean, cold points of light, if they could smell Earth. Probably nothing, because the Wild West stank in a very human way. And that was kind of beautiful. You wake the next morning with your face stuck to your sleeve. It takes you a second to realize why. Sweat mostly, but also last night's dinner. You must have wiped your mouth and forgotten, leaving a sticky trail of beans and something that tasted vaguely like jerky. You sit up, crack your neck, and immediately reach for your water canteen. Empty. Your tongue feels like it's wearing socks. You know what you need. Water. But not to drink to clean your face. To rinse your eyes, to feel somewhat human. Because today's not just any day. Today you're heading to the general store. And that means you'll be standing near other people. You find a shallow bowl in your pack, one that's cracked on the side, but still holds a few gulps worth. You pour in the last of your shared jug, maybe a cup, and a half of warm, slightly brown water. You could boil it, but what's the point? You're not drinking it. You're washing with it. You crouch, splash, rub. And for a fleeting moment, you feel something like dignity. Now let's talk about laundry, because even if you managed to clean yourself, your clothes were a different story entirely. Washing clothes in the Wild West wasn't just a chore, it was an event. A laborious all-day back-breaking war against grime. You started by hauling water buckets upon buckets, either from the creek, a well, or the rain barrel out back. You had to heat it over the fire often in a giant metal wash tub that took half an hour to get lukewarm and another half hour to burn the tips of your fingers. Then came the soap, if you had any. That gray, abrasive block made of animal fat and ashes. If not, you made do with sand lye or nothing at all. Next step, scrubbing, with a washboard if you were lucky. With your hands and a flat rock if you weren't. You scrubbed until your fingers bled, until the fabric wore thin, until the sweat dripping from your brow landed on what you were trying to clean. And then you had to rinse. Twice if you cared. Once if you were realistic. Now you're thinking, okay, at least now the clothes are clean. But no, they're soaked and heavy. So you wring them out by hand, twisting the fabric until your shoulders ache, and then hang them over a fence, a bush, or a rope tied between two fence posts. Then the dust starts blowing, or a horse kicks mud up, or a child knocks them into the dirt. You sigh and start again. Some families saved laundry for special occasions. Others did what was called spot washing, cleaning only what absolutely had to be cleaned, like a collar or the front of a shirt if you were going to town. One woman in a mining camp wrote in her journal that she washed her husband's shirt sleeves twice a week, but only the cuffs and forearms. The rest no longer takes stain, she noted. It is the stain. Men, meanwhile, often just didn't wash. They wore the same undershirt and trousers until the smell became tactical, strong enough to keep mosquitoes and conversation at bay. Cowboys were infamous for this. Their outfits were worn more like armor than clothing. Dust, sweat, and horsehair were baked into every fiber. If they got wet crossing a river, that counted as laundry day. If they fell in mud, that was a bonus round. Historians still argue whether traveling peddlers or farmers had worse hygiene habits. Some suggest that peddlers at least had access to towns and bathhouses, while farmers had more water, but fewer reasons to bother. But either way, clean clothes were a symbol, not a standard. Wearing something fresh meant you were about to go to church, being married, being buried, or had just committed a serious crime and wanted to appear respectable in court. Otherwise, you wore what you had. You patched it. You aired it out when the smell got too bold. And if it really became a problem, you burned it, literally. Clothing in the Wild West was often so saturated with sweat body oils and animal grease that it became flammable. Some laundresses refused to touch certain garments for fear of infection or because they couldn't stomach the smell. But here's the wild thing. You start to not care. Or rather, you start to care differently. You begin to judge cleanliness not by how someone smells, but by how their collar lies, by whether their boots are polished, by the angle of their hat. You accept that people aren't clean, not in the modern sense, but they're trying, and that matters. That afternoon, you stand in front of the general store mirror, squinting at your reflection. Your shirt is wrinkled. Your face is sunburned. There's dust in your eyebrows. But your hands, you washed them this morning. They're cracked, but they're clean. And for a brief, fleeting moment, you look presentable. A little wild, a little weathered, but presentable. You step out into the sun and breathe in the smell of horse manure and gun oil and someone cooking onions nearby. And you think this is normal. This is home. Because out here in this world of hard lives and harder landscapes, hygiene isn't about being spotless. It's about survival. It's about small wins. And if that means washing your socks in creek water, drying them on a fence, and wearing them stiff as bark, then that's what you do. Because nobody cares what you smell like in the Wild West, as long as you don't die from it. The sun is punishing today. High noon, no shade, and the dust is baking into your skin like seasoning on a skillet. Every step kicks up grit that clings to your boots, then creeps up your pants, then settles into the folds behind your knees. You shift your weight, hoping the next breeze will carry some of it away, but the wind is dry and stingy, more likely to slap you in the face with sand than offer relief. You're sweating. Again. Always. But here's the thing about sweating in the Wild West, it never ends. It just shifts location. Your forehead beads up first, then your armpits, then your back. Your thighs chafe from the endless rubbing of rough cotton. Your hat helps, but it also traps the heat against your scalp, creating a sauna effect that leaves your hair slick and sticky. You wonder how long it'll be before you start to smell like spoiled milk. Someone nearby wipes his neck with a rag that could double as a dish rag, or a dish rag that once tried to be a rag and failed. He tucks it into his belt like a trophy. That rag has survived more sweat than a saddle. You tip your canteen, just a drop left. You sip it like it's whiskey. You need a bath. Again. But today you're not thinking about creeks or canteens or bathhouses. Today you're thinking about alternatives. Because here's a not-so-fun fact in the Wild West. When there's no soap, no bath, and no time, people got creative. Very creative. Let's start with dry cleaning, the literal kind. People used sand. Yes, sand. Rubbing sand into your skin and clothes actually helped remove oils and dirt. It was like an improvised exfoliant and washing machine in one. Cowboys would take a handful of fine, dry sand and scrub it over their arms, legs, even their scalp. It didn't smell better, but it felt less greasy, which counted for a lot. It also helped remove lice, or at least scare them off. The fringe benefit. After a sand scrub, you were usually too sore to care how dirty you still were. Others used vinegar if they had it. A splash of vinegar diluted in water could be used to wipe down armpits, feet, and other offensive zones. It didn't clean much, but it neutralized odors. Sort of. It also made you smell like pickles. Still better than rot. Then there were the plant tricks. Native American tribes, as well as seasoned settlers, often relied on local herbs and leaves. Sagebrush, for example, could be crushed into a sort of makeshift deodorant. Yarrow leaves were used for wiping down skin. Pine needles steeped in hot water made a passable hair rinse and doubled as a skin tonic. You've probably heard of cowboys chewing on twigs to clean their teeth. That wasn't a myth. They'd use willow or licorice root, biting down and fraying one end into a brush. It wasn't minty fresh, but it helped keep teeth from rotting out of your head. And that in the West was a victory. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies were truly effective or just psychological. Some claim that regular use of wild plants helped reduce infection and odor. Others say it just masked the inevitable for a few more hours. But there's no denying that people believed in them. And belief, especially in a world this filthy, was a powerful cleanser in itself. Back to your day. You're riding again, shirt-damp thighs aching. You pass a group of women washing clothes in a shallow bend of the river. They're beating shirts against flat stones, the wet fabric slapping like applause. Children splash nearby, turning the water the color of weak coffee. One woman has her hair tied in a scarf, her sleeves rolled to the elbows. She looks up, notices you watching, and gives a tired smile. She's working, not washing. Doing laundry was never restful. You tip your hat in silent respect and move on. By late afternoon, the sun has cooked everything into stillness. The air buzzes with heat. Flies circle your horse's head, your face, your everything. You swat absently already, too tired to care. Then you catch sight of something rare, a rain barrel. It's propped beside a tiny shack on the edge of town, half full of water left from last night's storm. It's dark, littered with leaves, maybe a dead beetle or two. But it's water. You glance around. No one's watching. You unbuckle your canteen, dump the dregs, and fill it with the rainwater. Then, on a wild impulse, you dip both hands into the barrel and splash your face, your neck, your ears. The cold is a shock. It stings. It's glorious. You wash until the top layer of grime sloughs off like river clay. You scrub your scalp with your fingers, dislodging enough dust to start your own adobe factory. You laugh, out loud, and then freeze. A kid is watching you from behind a post. You smile sheepishly and offer a silent salute. He grins, then disappears. You feel lighter, cleaner, maybe not by city standards, but by your standards. You pour a little extra over your shirt and walk back into town dripping. Let them stare. You smell like sky water. Later, as the sun dips and the light softens, you sit by the fire and pull off your boots. You consider your socks. They are unholy. You set them near the fire to crisp, not to dry, just to kill whatever's living in there. You rub your feet in the dirt, then wipe them with the tail of your shirt. Is that gross? Yes. Is it effective? Also, yes. Out here, the line between disgusting and practical is thin, often invisible. You lie back on your blanket arms, behind your head, and stare at the stars. Your skin is still gritty. Your hair still smells faintly of horse, but your face is clean. Your canteen is full, and for once, just once, you don't feel like a walking compost heap. The wind rustles the grass, cool against your arms. You close your eyes, and sleep comes faster than it has in days, because sometimes all it takes is a splash of rainwater and a clean face to make you feel whole again. You wake before dawn, not because you're well rested. No, the chill got into your bones, and your back feels like it spent the night wrestling a sack of hammers. Your blanket is damp with morning dew, and there's a weird smell coming from your boots. You don't investigate. You just hope it's not alive. With your eyes still half closed, you begin the sacred morning routine of the Wild West, a full-body inventory to make sure nothing's fallen off, gone numb, or become home to something with more legs than you're comfortable counting. Good news, you're still in one piece. Bad news, you smell like a mix between campfire smoke and goat. You stretch, groan, and shuffle over to the embers of last night's fire, using the toe of your boot to stir it back to life. A few minutes later, you've got a small flame going and a pot of coffee strong enough to double as paint remover. As it simmers, you grab your bandana and start your wash. You wet it with a few drops from your canteen and swipe it across your face, neck, and underarms. It's a technique known as a cowboy bath, just enough water to move the dirt around, not enough to remove it entirely. But you feel better, fresher almost. Your standards have evolved. Let's talk about dental hygiene, or the lack thereof. You pick up a stick and start chewing one end until it frays into a soft brush. Congratulations, you now have a toothbrush. Back then, toothbrushes existed, but not everyone had one. If you were lucky, you had a bone-handled brush with coarse bristles that could double as a wire scrubber. If you weren't, you used what you had: twigs, cloth, or even a finger toothpaste. Nope, you might find baking soda, or salt, or crushed charcoal. Some people used ash from the fire. Others just didn't bother. Because in the Wild West, teeth weren't maintained. They were endured until they rotted. And then they were removed. Dentists were rare. The local blacksmith sometimes doubled as one. Yes, you heard that right. He had pliers. He had a hammer. He had experience in pulling iron from hooves, so surely he could handle molars. Historians still argue whether frontier dentistry caused more damage than it prevented. One letter from the 1860s describes a tooth being yanked from the root with such force that the patient bled from the ear. Makes you appreciate that frayed stick, doesn't it? By the time you finish your coffee, if it can be called that, the sun is peeking over the hills. You pack up camp. Your boots are stiff, and your shirt has taken on a new, unidentifiable texture. But you're ready for the day, ready to ride into another cloud of dust sweat, through another layer of grime, and meet it all with a shrug. Because by now, your body has adapted. Your skin has grown a film of toughness. Your nose has turned traitor. It no longer reports anything offensive. You walk into town and no longer feel out of place among the other men, women, and children who are all equally stained by survival. You make a quick stop at the general store. Inside the shelves are lined with tins, jars, and the occasional box of toilet powder. You pick one up and give it a shake. It rattles. You open it cautiously. Inside is a mix of talc and something vaguely minty. You buy it on the spot. Talcum powder in the Wild West was often homemade, consisting of crushed chalk, baking soda, and cornstarch. It didn't clean you, but it hid the problem. Dusted underarms, inside socks, and around collars, it gave the illusion of freshness. It became your secret weapon. Outside the store, you run into a preacher. He's sweating through his collar, his Bible under one arm, and a look of mild despair on his face. He's organizing a public hygiene day. You blink at him. Yes, you heard that right. In some towns especially, as they grew, hygiene became a community issue. People were encouraged, sometimes ordered, to clean themselves, their homes, and their animals. Local laws were passed about waste disposal. Towns banned dumping chamber pots into the street. Bathhouses were inspected. Churches got involved. Some even hosted washing events, communal cleaning, under the guise of spiritual renewal. You know, clean body, clean soul. Whether people actually scrubbed or just nodded politely and went home is debatable, but the message stuck. You pass the livery stable next, where a young man is brushing a horse with more care than most people brush their own hair. He whistles as he works, flicking straw from the horse's flank. You realize something strange. That horse smells better than you. Again. You consider brushing yourself down with a curry comb. Might not be a bad idea. Back at camp, you strip off your boots and douse your socks in leftover talc. You hang them on a stick to dry, hoping the sun and powder will work some kind of miracle. Then you spot something moving. Fleas or lice. You're not sure. You decide to burn the socks. They go up in a cheerful puff. You feel strangely victorious. That night, as you settle under the stars, you take stock. You've survived another day. You're still coated in a layer of sweat and trail dust. Your shirt smells like desperation and coffee. Your teeth feel like they've been through a bar fight. But you learned something today. A damp rag is sacred. Talc is a blessing, and sometimes burning is the only solution. As you lie back, the night air cools your face. Your skin tightens where it's clean. You smile, not because you're pristine, but because you have found a rhythm. A gritty, dusty, stink-filled rhythm. And that in the Wild West is as close to hygiene as it gets. You're halfway through your week now, and you're starting to notice a pattern. You stink. Not just regular stink either. No, this is something more existential. A kind of metaphysical funk that seems to cling to your soul. Your hat smells like a smoked pig. Your shirt has become an ecosystem. And your boots, well, let's just say they could legally qualify as livestock by now. And yet, you're not alone. The man sitting next to you at the saloon bar hasn't changed clothes in at least 9 days. You know this because he told you with pride. Helps keep the flies confused, he said, swatting one lazily off his forehead. You nod in admiration. Out here, that counts as a hygiene strategy. So, let's talk about perfume. Yes, perfume in the Wild West. It wasn't as rare as you might think. In fact, many women and a few men carried small glass bottles of scented oils or colognes. Lavender, rosewater, citrus. Anything to cover up the reek of the day. Some mixed their own using alcohol and herbs. A few wealthier types imported tiny vials from New York or Europe. These weren't for romantic purposes. They were defensive weapons. You didn't wear perfume to seduce, you wore it, so people didn't faint when you walked past. One woman wrote in her diary that she dabbed rosewater behind her ears, not for beauty, but to prevent fainting when passing my brother. Men had their own version, bay rum, a curious potion made from rum bay leaves and cinnamon bay rum served as aftershave cologne disinfectant, and on particularly desperate nights, mouthwash. It stung going on. It reeked of spice and bravado, but it masked the worst of the trail. You carry a tiny flask of it in your saddlebag. You found it wedged under a floorboard in an abandoned shack, still half full. You don't question the date. You just splash it on your collar and feel instantly 14% more respectable. It doesn't make you clean, but it makes you believable. By midday, the heat is back with a vengeance. You wander past the blacksmiths, where the hammering of iron has turned the air molten. Even the flies look tired. You spot a boy pouring water over a rag and pressing it to his neck. You do the same. Wet cloths were the frontier's air conditioning. Soaked in cool water, tied around the neck or forehead, they helped lower your body temperature and made you feel cleaner, even if you weren't. Sometimes people soaked cloths in vinegar or whiskey. The sting was worth the illusion of freshness. You tie your own damp bandana around your neck, and for a moment you could almost pretend it's a spa with mosquitoes and horse manure, but a spa nonetheless. There's a woman at the edge of town who runs a boarding house. Her name's Miss Clara, and she's terrifying, not because she's mean, but because she's clean. Her floors shine. Her sheets are white. Her parlor smells like lemon peel and stern judgment. And every Friday she hosts wash socials gatherings where women come to do laundry together and gossip under the guise of purification. You've never been invited for obvious reasons, but once you watched from a distance as 3 women hauled in bed sheets and left with them smelling like sun and soap. You still remember that smell. It haunts your dreams. Historians still debate whether boarding houses like Clara's were bastions of hygiene or just slightly tidier disease factories. But what's certain is that people tried. They scrubbed their floors with vinegar. They boiled their linens. They beat dust from rugs with broom handles until the whole street knew it was Tuesday. Cleanliness was a performance, and you performed for survival, because disease didn't care about effort. Let's talk about that. The Wild West was a breeding ground for illness. Typhoid, cholera, dysentery, all thrived in places where hygiene was more hope than habit. A contaminated water source could wipe out a town. A single sick cow could poison a family. Doctors were few. Antibiotics didn't exist. And the phrase septic shock wasn't a diagnosis. It was a death sentence. You learned to wash your hands not because it was trendy, but because the guy who didn't might be buried by sundown. People used boiled water when they could. They sterilized instruments with flame. They didn't always understand why it worked, but they saw the patterns. Dirt killed. Clean survived. It was that simple. You return to camp just as the wind picks up. Dust storms are nature's way of reminding you that hygiene is a losing battle. Within minutes, everything's covered. Your bedroll, your cup, your face. You pull your hat down low and spit grit from your teeth. When it settles, you wipe your face with your sleeve and sigh. There's a new layer now, a crunchy one. You reach for your bay rum. You dab some under your nose and breathe in deep. Spice, alcohol, hope. You smile. You're not clean, but you're still here. And out here, that's enough. Evening finds you in the same shirt you wore yesterday, and the day before, and possibly the day before that. It's hard to say. The fabric now has the color and texture of a toasted saddle. You run your fingers along the collar, and they come back grayish, not from dye, but from life. Still, the shirt holds together, and so do you. You walk to the nearby stream, more of a muddy trickle at this time of year, and kneel beside it. The water is warm, shallow, and filled with mosquito larvae doing their little squiggly dance. It doesn't inspire confidence, but you know this is probably your best shot at bathing today. So, you roll up your sleeves, dunk your hands, and splash your face. It's not refreshing, but it's ritual. You strip off your shirt and slap it against a flat rock. A small cloud of dust and something suspiciously alive floats off. You splash it with water, rub it against itself, then slap it again. This is the frontier laundry cycle. Soak, slap, scrub, and pray. Soap. You don't have any, but you do have a hunk of salt. You rub that against a stubborn patch of grease, hoping the friction and sheer willpower will do the job. By the time you finish, the shirt is less dirty. Not clean, just less embarrassing. You lay it over a bush to dry and sit back shirtless, letting the breeze hit your chest. There are bite marks from yesterday's horsefly swarm, a faint sunburn from the noon ride, and something that might be poison ivy. You scratch. You regret it immediately. Let's talk about itching, because in the Wild West, everyone itched. Bugs, sweat, heat, rash, lice, scabies, you name it. Itching was the background music of the West. You'd be surprised how many cowboys carried a long wooden stick for scratching the middle of their back. One man reportedly filed the end of his belt buckle into a hook specifically for that purpose. Powders helped a little, baking soda or cornstarch, but mostly, folks just endured it. They itched with dignity, scratched in secret, or didn't bother pretending. Historians still argue whether lice were more prevalent in cattle camps or mining towns. Some say miners had it worse because they rarely bathed and lived in tight, sweaty bunkhouses. Others argue cattlemen were more exposed to animals and dirt. Both agree on one thing: everyone scratched, and everyone shared. Beds, blankets, hats. Lice didn't care who you were. They just wanted company. You lie back in the grass half-dressed and watch your shirt flap in the breeze like a surrender flag. This is what counts as laundry day now. You feel oddly satisfied. A little later, you're at the saloon again, nursing a watered-down whiskey and trying not to breathe through your nose. The man next to you smells like boiled cabbage and tobacco. You nod politely. He nods back. Neither of you say a word about it, because in the Wild West, commenting on someone's odor was practically a dual challenge. You learn to tolerate a lot out here. Odors, noise, dust, pain, other people, and they tolerate you back. At the far end of the saloon, a traveling salesman sets up shop. He's selling miracle soap, claims it's imported from France, promises to remove stains, soften skin, cure boils, and maybe, just maybe, make you smell like something other than wet barn. You listen skeptically. He opens the lid. The smell hits you like a choir of lemons and lavender. Everyone in the room leans forward in unison, like moths to a scented flame. You don't buy it, can't afford it, but you remember that smell. It follows you for the rest of the night. Back at camp, you retrieve your shirt. It's mostly dry. You give it a sniff. It's better. Damp grass dust and something like freedom. You slide it over your head and immediately regret the wet shoulder seam. But hey, it's not crunchy anymore. Progress. You settle in for the night. Fire crackling. Coyotes howling in the distance. Your fingers still smell like salt rock and horse mane, but your face is cleanish and your shirt is slightly less offensive. It's enough to make you feel human. And here's a funny thing about hygiene in the Wild West. It wasn't really about cleanliness. It was about dignity. You cleaned yourself, not because you had to, but because it reminded you that you were alive, that you were more than just an animal surviving in the dust. A splash of water, a scrub of soap, a brush of the teeth, even if improvised, was a small act of rebellion against the filth, the chaos, and the sheer grind of frontier life. So tonight, as you lie on your bedroll and listen to the insects sing lullabies from the grass, you feel something like peace. You're not clean, but you tried, and that's what counts. The sun is already high when you wake, and your shirt, though drier than it was last night, has now molded itself to your torso like a second, slightly resentful skin. You peel it off with a groan and slap it against your thigh to shake out any overnight stowaways. Something vaguely leg-shaped drops out and scurries into the grass. You decide not to chase it. Breakfast is a piece of jerky that tastes like smoked tire tread, and a sip from your canteen, which has now adopted the slight aftertaste of the bush your shirt dried on last night. You chew slowly, listening to the horses shift in the corral, the leather saddles creaking like old knees. You've got a full day ahead, and you're already sticky. Today you're riding into a larger town, a place with more than one street, more than one saloon, and most importantly, a bathhouse. You've heard rumors about it. A copper tub, warm water, towels, soap that comes in bars, not bark. Could be a lie, might be a trap, but you're desperate enough to risk it. You ride in just before noon. The town bustles in a way only frontier towns can. Men unloading wagons, women scolding barefoot children, dogs barking at shadows. Everything smells like sun and manure. You spot the bathhouse almost immediately. A squat wooden building with peeling paint and a sign that says simply, Baths, 10C. You would have paid 10 times that. You tie your horse to the rail and step inside. The air is humid, smoky, and slightly sweet. A thin man with rolled-up sleeves and a permanent squint greets you with a nod. "Tub's clean," he says. "Don't drink the water." You nod back and hand him a coin. You're led to a small curtained room, and there it is, the tub, big enough to sit in, filled with actual warm water, steam rising in lazy curls. There's a small cake of lye soap, a rag, and a towel folded like it means something. You stare at it all in silence. Is this heaven? You undress like someone peeling off armor. Every item of clothing makes a noise as it hits the floor. Thump, slap, crack. You step into the tub and immediately tense. The water bites at first, but then it cradles. You sink lower and lower until only your head and toes remain above water. You close your eyes. You could cry. Bathhouses in the Wild West weren't common, but they were coveted. In towns large enough to afford one, they offered more than just cleanliness. They were a ritual, a reset button. Sometimes bathhouses were attached to barber shops or even brothels. For a few coins you could scrub away weeks of grime, get a shave, and feel like a respectable citizen again. Not clean, but closer. You take the rag, dip it in the water, and begin scrubbing. Dirt sloughs off in waves. Underneath your skin is pink not from soap, but from shock. You find scratches you didn't know you had, bug bites, a bruise shaped like Kansas. You lather the soap and scrub your scalp. The suds turn gray, then brown. You rinse and repeat. You do it twice more, just for the feeling. There's a knock on the door. 10 minutes. You nearly panic. You rinse once more, dunking your whole body like it's a baptism. You step out dripping and wobbly. You dry off with the towel, which is thinner than it looked, but still more luxurious than anything you've touched in months. You dress slowly, reverently. Your shirt feels like betrayal after such purity, but your body, it glows. You leave the bathhouse walking 2 inches taller. As you step into the dusty street again, the world looks sharper. People move around you like shadows. You catch your reflection in a window. It startles you. Is that your face? Is that skin? You run a finger along your jawline and feel actual smoothness. You smell like soap and wood smoke and something else, something like dignity. You vow to hold on to this sensation as long as possible. You give it 3 days, max. Historians still debate the sanitation level of frontier bathhouses. Some argue they were just hot tubs of bacteria spreading diseases faster than handshakes. Others insist they provided essential services in a time when disease was everywhere. Either way, the psychological benefit was undeniable. People left feeling new, even if the water didn't stay clean for long. You head to the general store and buy yourself a small bar of soap and a tin of tooth powder. They cost more than you want to admit, but you don't care. You tuck them into your saddlebag like treasure. You might be back on the trail tomorrow, but tonight you smell like civilization. And maybe, just maybe, you sleep without your shirt sticking to your back. You don't even make it 2 full days. By the afternoon of day 2, The soapskin glow has dulled to a faint memory, and your shirt has resumed its role as personal terrarium. The dust finds you again. The saddle rubs a raw patch on your thigh, and your canteen water tastes like regret. But you carry on, because now you know something that most people out here have already figured out. You can't win against dirt. Not for long. Out here, hygiene is less a goal and more of a game of inches. You never really get clean. You just negotiate with the filth and hope for a favorable truce. Take body odor, for example. Everyone has it. It's not even considered impolite unless yours is unusually offensive. But even then, the blame usually falls on the weather, your horse, or whatever you ate that week. You step into a saloon for a drink and the air hits you like a damp wool blanket soaked in whiskey and sweat. No one flinches. No one gags. This is just how air smells indoors. You grab a seat at a corner table. The man next to you reeks of tobacco grease and what might be pickles. The woman across from him smells like lard and peppermint. You currently smell like saddle leather pine smoke and the faint, heartbreaking echo of that lavender soap. It's an orchestra of odors, and no one says a word. They say smell is the strongest sense tied to memory. Here, it's tied to survival. You know who's sick by their smell. You know when meat's gone bad, when water's off, when boots have molded, or when someone's been sleeping too close to the pigs. A trapper once told you he could smell when wolves were nearby. You believed him. Out here, noses aren't just for breathing, they're warning systems. You remember that time last month when your buddy Joe fell into a stagnant creek while chasing a runaway mule. He emerged covered in mud and algae and something that might have once been a frog. He laughed. You gagged. The mule left him. So did everyone else for a while. He didn't take it personally. After all, he still smelled better than the latrine behind the blacksmith shop. Let's pause for a moment to talk about what people used to cover odor. Because while deodorant as we know it didn't exist, folks tried. They rubbed lemon rinds on their underarms. They wore sachets of dried herbs around their necks or in their pockets. Women tucked lavender in their corsets. Men dabbed bay rum on their wrists. If it grew and it smelled stronger than a goat, someone rubbed it somewhere. The strangest you've heard, a cattle rancher who swore by vinegar and baking soda baths. Said it reset the meat stink. You didn't ask further. Historians still argue whether body odor played a role in courtship rituals. Some claim people genuinely preferred natural musk, while others suggest they just had no better options. Either way, there was no swiping left on a smell. You held your breath and hoped for the best. You finish your whiskey, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, and step outside. The breeze hits your face like a blessing. You inhale dust, horses, sweat, flour bread baking 2 doors down, and underneath it all, the familiar tang of you. Not clean you, but the version of you that can saddle a horse with one eye open, skin a rabbit in the rain, and navigate a poker game while sitting in week-old pants. You smile. It's a smell you've come to respect. That night, back at your camp, you attempt something bold, a full change of clothes. You dig to the bottom of your bedroll sack and pull out a spare shirt and set of undergarments you haven't worn since July. They smell neutral. You hold them to the firelight like ancient relics. You strip fast before the wind changes and toss the old clothes into the corner. They land with a sound like a damp slap. Then you dress, and suddenly you feel lighter, different, like someone who deserves real food or a letter from home. Of course, you're still filthy. You haven't scrubbed your boots in a month. Your hair crackles when you run your fingers through it. But for one brief moment, you feel like you've tricked the world. You've outwitted the grime. You sleep better that night, almost like a man with a bathtub waiting for him. You're sitting in the barber's chair now, and by chair, of course, we mean a creaky wooden throne with one arm slightly lower than the other, and upholstery that's absorbed more secrets than any confession booth ever has. The man standing behind you has a razor in one hand, a towel slung over his shoulder, and what might be a bullet casing tucked behind his ear for luck. He doesn't ask what kind of cut you want. He just starts. The blade whispers across your cheek, a scraping sound followed by the faint burn of old steel and alcohol. You close your eyes and let it happen. Because this isn't just a shave, it's a ritual. And in the Wild West, the barber shop isn't just a place to look better, it's where you go to survive. Barbers out here are not just barbers. They're part surgeon, part dentist, part therapist, and part town gossip. You've seen this very man pull teeth with a pair of rusted pliers, lance a boil with a boot knife, and cut a bullet out of a rancher's thigh with nothing but whiskey thread and one long prayer. And now he's giving you a shave. This is intimacy in its rawest form, blade to skin. No room for twitching. You stay still, not because of fear, but because of respect. You've heard stories. One man sneezed mid-shave and lost half an ear. Another tried to joke while getting his neck trimmed and ended up with a scar shaped like Nevada. You've learned to breathe slow, through your nose, shallow breaths. Trust the rhythm. The towel on your chest is warm, faintly damp, and smells like cloves and tobacco. The straight razor shaves closer than anything you've felt in weeks. You can almost feel your skin, remembering what it's like to not be a crusty terrain of dirt and sunburn. Afterward, he wipes your face with a cloth that's only mildly stained. He pats your cheek with something sharp and stinging that might be aftershave or possibly turpentine. You don't ask. You just nod. It's the closest thing to medical care most folks will get this year. Historians still argue about the training level of frontier barbers. Some believe they had formal apprenticeships. Others claim they learned on the job often, by trial and highly visible error. What's certain is that the barber was one of the few men in town people trusted with a knife that close to their throat. And trust out here, that's a scarce commodity. You step outside feeling brand new. Your cheeks are smooth, your jawline reappears, and even though your shirt still smells like horse, at least your face is momentarily civilized. You see a kid playing in the dirt, smearing mud across his face and arms like war paint. His mother doesn't stop him, probably because she knows it'll all come off in the next thunderstorm or not at all. You remember that too, being that free. Now you're a grown adult who's thrilled about a clean chin. Progress. As you walk past the general store, you catch your reflection in the window. Sunlight, dust, and a faint outline of someone who looks like they've got their life together. You raise an eyebrow at yourself. The reflection does the same. Then you tip your hat and keep walking. Tonight the fire burns slower. The air is calm. You rub a little leftover shaving cream under your nose, not because you need to, but because it smells like civilization. You sleep better, because out here, a clean shave is worth more than gold. You wake to the sound of a thunderclap far in the distance. The air is heavier today, swollen with that strange electric pressure that comes before a summer storm. Your joints feel it. So does your scalp, which has started itching again. You reach up and scratch through your hair, only to find a tiny pebble nestled near your temple. Or is that something else? You flick it away and try not to think about it. Storms in the Wild West don't wait for permission. They arrive like visiting relatives, loud, inconvenient, and with no intention of cleaning up after themselves. You're on the move before dawn, trying to make it to a supply post before the rain turns the road into soup. The sky is streaked with bruised clouds. You ride faster, and all the while your shirt is starting to cling. There's an old trick you remember from a grizzled miner you once shared camp with. He used to rub his armpits and feet with a mixture of pine resin and crushed mint leaves. Said it kept the bugs off and the sweat manageable. You tried it once. You've never felt stickier in your life, but the mint was nice. As you reach the post station, the rain begins in earnest. It doesn't pour. It assaults. Fat, cold drops hammer your hat, your neck, your back. Within seconds, you're soaked. The dirt road melts into something between stew and quicksand. You slosh toward the outpost with water running down your spine and into your boots. A rooster watches you from under a wagon, looking smug. You don't blame it. Inside, the station smells like tobacco moldy flour and regret. But it's dry. You drop your gear with a wet thunk, remove your coat, and wring it out over a barrel. Then you sit by the stove steaming like old cabbage. There's a woman running the place today wearing an apron streaked with something unidentifiable, but probably edible. She offers you coffee. You accept mostly to warm your hands. You sip it. It tastes like someone once described coffee to a bucket of rainwater. Still, it's hot. One of the other men in the room is talking about earwax. He claims rubbing it on small cuts prevents infection. Another nods sagely and says he's heard the same about honey and spider webs. You stay quiet. Because hygiene in the Wild West doesn't just live in soap and towels. It lives in folk medicine, desperation, and bold experimentation. People used what they had. Honey, vinegar ashes, boiled pine needles, whiskey, garlic, animal fat. If it grew oozed or burned, someone had probably rubbed it on a rash. And if it stung, even better. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of these home remedies. Some swear by their antibacterial properties. Others call them hopeful superstition. You've seen both work and fail. You once tried brushing your teeth with powdered charcoal, like you heard from a trapper. It worked fine, until your gums started bleeding and you chipped a molar on a rock bit. Never again. You dry your face with the corner of your shirt. It's damp and smells like something you can't quite name, like yesterday's soup or someone else's sadness. You sigh. The woman brings out a wash basin and a sliver of yellow soap. You blink in disbelief. Rain gets in everything she says. Wash up. You don't argue. You dunk your hands, splash your face, and scrub until your skin feels less like leather and more like skin. You even clean behind your ears. You can't remember the last time you did that. When you look up, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the tin plate on the wall. Your eyes look clearer. Maybe it's just the coffee. The rain lets up by late afternoon. You gather your things, saddle up, and nod your thanks. As you ride away, the wind picks up. The air smells fresh now. Damp earth, wet wood, and ozone. It's strange how a good storm can wash away more than just dust. You feel something new, not clean exactly, but lighter, maybe cleaner on the inside. You ride on smiling. The sun returns with a vengeance the next day, like it's personally offended by the storm and has decided to punish the earth for daring to cool off. By mid-morning, your shirt is already sticking to your back like glue. Your socks are damp in that particularly awful way that suggests the moisture might be new sweat or old rain. You're back on the trail again, and today's path runs through flat country, miles and miles of dry, open nothing. The kind of nothing that bakes your skin, cracks your lips, and boils your thoughts down to a single phrase: I miss the bathhouse. You pull a kerchief over your nose, not for fashion, but for function. The dust on this trail doesn't billow. It hangs. You taste it when you breathe. You feel it behind your eyes. You can almost hear your pores begging for mercy. You pause near midday to rest the horse and give yourself a moment of shade under a half-dead cottonwood. You strip off your hat and let the wind hit your forehead. A few flakes of something drift down from your scalp. Dry skin, sunburn. You lean over, shake your head, and watch the tiny dustfall dance in the air. Then you dig into your saddlebag for the holy grail, that little bar of lavender soap, still intact, still with its scent, though now slightly mingled with old leather and tobacco. You don't dare use it here, not with no water in sight, but you hold it to your nose and breathe in deeply. The smell hits you like a memory. The bathhouse, the steam, the towel. It's enough to make your eyes close for just a second longer than they should. You jolt awake. 10 minutes later, the soap still in your hand. A horsefly is buzzing near your ear. You swat and miss. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a coyote yipping at the sun like it's personal. You tuck the soap away carefully, as if it were a keepsake, and remount your horse. The road waits, so does the sweat. Later at camp, you make a small fire and boil a tin cup of water, not for coffee, but for something more sacred, your feet. You remove your boots, slowly wincing as the leather peels away from your damp socks. Your toes sigh in relief. You dip a rag into the hot water and begin wiping your ankles and soles with the reverence of a priest preparing an altar. You're not even aiming for clean. You're just aiming for less foul. You remember something your grandfather used to say back before he wandered west and stopped writing letters? A man who doesn't take care of his feet doesn't take care of his soul. At the time you thought it was nonsense. Now you're starting to see his point. You rub between your toes with the edge of your shirt. You don't have a second pair of socks, but you hang the ones you just peeled off over a nearby branch and hope the night air shows mercy. Then you do something outrageous. You brush your teeth. Not with a brush. You don't own one. But you do have that tin of baking soda powder. You wet your finger, dip it in, and rub it along your teeth. The grit is unpleasant. The taste is worse. But afterward your mouth feels less like a barn floor and more like, well, a barn floor that's been swept. You rinse with the rest of your boiled water. It's not glamorous, but out here, tooth rot is no joke. You've seen what happens to men who don't take care of their teeth. One guy tried to pull his own molar with a bullet casing and a shoelace. It ended badly, very badly. Historians still debate how often frontiersmen actually attempted dental care. Some believe it was routine to chew mint or charcoal. Others insist most folks just waited for their teeth to fall out or rot away. Both camps agree pain tolerance back then was legendary. You sit back with your cleanish feet, your semi-fresh mouth, and the last of your dried apples. You chew slowly, savoring the sugar, trying not to think about the dirt now caked around your fingernails. You watch the sunset, and for a brief moment, it all feels peaceful. The sky is orange. Your fire crackles. A cool breeze floats through camp, rustling the edge of your shirt. You breathe in deeply. And despite everything, the sweat, the flies, the dust, the permanent dirt tattoo on your elbows, you smile. Because today, you took care of yourself. Just a little. And out here, that's enough. You start the day already sweating. Before breakfast, before the sun even crests the ridge, there it is. The telltale stickiness down your spine, the slightly sour feeling under your arms, the damp weight clinging to your collar like a guilty conscience. You sigh, take off your hat, and slap it against your thigh. Dust rises, sweat follows. There's no winning this. Today's ride is through cattle country, which is a polite way of saying, prepare your nose. The scent drifts toward you long before the cows themselves do. It's a heavy smell, sweet, sour, earthy, and absolutely everywhere. You pass a group of them early on and they barely blink at your presence. One even stares long enough to make you uncomfortable, as if judging your hygiene choices. You wonder how they manage to stay so unbothered by the smell. Probably helps if you're the one causing it. You stop at a ranch around midday. Just a stretch of land with a crooked fence, a lopsided barn, and a woman with a shotgun who eyes you suspiciously until you tip your hat and offer a polite, "Howdy, ma'am." She lets you water your horse and points you toward the well for your own needs. The water is cold, gloriously cold. You splash your face cup some into your palms and rub it along your neck, your arms, the back of your head. It feels like being reborn for 5 seconds, then the breeze hits your wet skin and suddenly you're shivering under the desert sun. You decide it's worth it. You ask the ranch hand if there's a place to do laundry. He laughs so hard, he almost drops the bucket he's holding. "Laundry," he repeats as if you've just asked for a golden bathtub and a string quartet. But then he gestures toward a washtub near the barn. "Help yourself," he says. "Ain't been used this week. Probably clean enough." You eye the tub. There's a film of something floating on the surface. Maybe soap, maybe grease. You don't ask. You strip off your shirt and dunk it into the water. The fabric changes color as the dirt releases in clouds. You knead the fabric with your fists, slapping it against the edge of the tub like it insulted your mother. The water darkens quickly. You rinse it twice, maybe 3 times, then wring it out until your arms ache. You hang it on a fence post to dry. It might still smell like a horse's armpit, but at least it'll be your clean horse's armpit. You do the same with your socks and undershirt. No one watches. No one cares. This is the Wild West. People only notice laundry when it's missing. A breeze picks up. You sit under the shade with your damp shirt hanging nearby and start brushing the dust off your boots with a stick. It doesn't do much, but it makes you feel civilized. Like maybe if someone squints from a distance, you could pass for someone who bathes regularly. You pull out a small mirror you keep wrapped in a cloth. It's scratched and cloudy, but enough to see yourself. And there you are, sunburnt, chapped lips, a smudge of something mud bacon grease near your eyebrow. But beneath it all, you see a glimmer of the person you used to be, the one who didn't smell like cattle and regret, the one who wore cologne once, maybe twice. You chuckle. That guy wouldn't last a day out here. Historians still argue about the actual frequency of laundry among settlers and frontiersmen. Some claim it was a weekly ritual tied to church attendance or supply runs. Others suggest folks only bothered when their clothes could stand up on their own, based on the way your shirt just leaned against the fence and sighed. You're starting to believe the latter. Later that evening, you slip back into your damp, sun-dried clothes. They're stiff, scratchy, smell vaguely of soap and wind. But somehow it feels better. You feel lighter, freer, even if just for a night. Clean clothes don't solve everything, but they give you hope. Hope that maybe tomorrow you'll find a stream, or a friendly innkeeper, or a rainstorm that doesn't smell like cow. You sit by your fire watching the stars creep into the sky, and for the first time in days, you don't itch, you don't stink, you don't feel like you're being swallowed by your own shadow. You breathe in deeply and Smile. You might not be clean, not really. But tonight, you're close enough. You wake up before dawn, not because you want to, but because your back has fused to the ground and your right leg is asleep from the knee down. You shift, groan, and brush something off your face that might be a beetle or just a dream. There's a dew-damp chill in the air, clinging to your clothes like cold soup. You sit up slowly, joints popping like overused hinges, and let out a long breath that fogs in front of your face. Your shirt is stiff from yesterday's washing. It smells like dust and sun-dried soap, which frankly is an improvement. You stretch, yawn, and begin the morning ritual, if you can call it that. A rinse of the face from your water canteen. A couple of dry fingers raked through your hair. A good spit into the dirt. This is what passes for grooming on the trail. You head toward town today. It's not a big town, just a cluster of buildings pretending they're more important than they are. A saloon, a general store, a livery, and a couple of homes strung along a dusty street. But more importantly, this town has what you've been craving for days: a bathhouse. It doesn't look like much from the outside. Just a long wooden building with a porch that sags a little in the middle and a cracked sign that reads, "Wash and soak." But the smell is heavenly. Steam soap, old cedar, and just a hint of desperation. You step inside and are immediately hit with a wave of warm, moist air. It wraps around you like a blanket and seeps into your skin. The man behind the counter doesn't even look up. He's halfway through a biscuit and humming a song you don't recognize. Room and back, he grunts. 50 cents for soap. $1 for hot water. You drop a coin on the counter before he even finishes the sentence. You're led to a stall with a large tin tub already half filled. A second man arrives a few minutes later, hauling a bucket of boiling water and another of cold. He dumps them both into your tub with the precision of a chemist, then nods and disappears without a word. You strip, slowly, carefully, like someone removing bandages. Your shirt peels off your back with a faint squelch. Your socks leave marks on your calves. You catch sight of yourself in the fogged-up mirror above the towel rack, and it's a sight. You look like someone who's been surviving hygiene, not practicing it. Your hair is matted, your arms are covered in a film of trail grime. Your skin has taken on that pale brown hue of someone who hasn't seen soap in a week, but has seen plenty of dust. You step into the tub. The water is just hot enough to sting, and just filthy enough to remind you it's shared with strangers. But right now, it feels like salvation. You sink deeper and exhale. And for a moment, time stops. No trail, no saddle sores, no bugs, just heat, steam, and the slow dissolve of dirt. You reach for the soap. It's a misshapen lump that smells vaguely of lemon and regret. But it lathers. Oh, it lathers. You scrub with a fury that surprises even you. Your arms, your chest, behind the ears, the back of the neck, between every toe, and then the hair. You work the lather into your scalp until it looks like you're wearing a meringue. The water darkens around you. You don't care. This is the cleanest you've felt in weeks. You linger longer than you should. The water's cooling now, and the steam is thinning. You rise slowly, trying not to splash too much of the gray-brown soup onto the floor. You dry off with a towel that might have once been white. It scrapes more than it pats. You wrap it around your waist, step into the next stall, and sit on the wooden bench provided for cooling off. There's a small mirror here, too. This time you actually look. You look like someone worth talking to. As you dress, you notice your old clothes now seem more offensive than ever. The shirt you washed on the fence yesterday is stiff and crusty in the corners. You shake it out and put it on anyway. The pants follow, and your socks, which somehow now feel like betrayal. But you're clean underneath, and that's what matters. You leave the bathhouse with damp hair and a slow stride. The street looks different now, less hostile. You nod to a stranger, who actually nods back. A dog passes you without sniffing or growling. Progress. Historians still argue whether regular bathing was considered a luxury or a necessity in small frontier towns. Some records suggest townspeople bathed weekly, especially when public bathhouses were available. Others argue it was closer to once a month, or even seasonally. What no one disagrees about, that first bath after a long ride felt like a religious experience. You duck into the general store next. They've got a barrel of lye soap, some combs, a stack of linen shirts, and miracle of miracles, a bottle of rose water. It's overpriced, completely impractical. You buy it anyway, because why not? You splash a little on your wrists and rub some behind your ears. It burns. It tickles. It smells like choices, like dignity, like someone who might one day own a second shirt. You walk past the saloon, past the livery, past a boy playing marbles in the dirt, and they all feel like part of a different world now. One where people wash, where hands are clean and hair is combed. You smile to yourself. This won't last. Tomorrow you'll be sweating again, covered in trail dust, itching in places you don't want to mention. But for now, you're new. You're clean. And for just a moment, the Wild West doesn't feel so wild. The clean feeling doesn't last. It never does. You wake up the next morning in a rented room above the saloon, and it's already creeping back, that faint stickiness in the bend of your elbows, the damp warmth collecting under your knees, the gritty sensation behind your ears, even though you scrubbed them like a man possessed just yesterday. The sheets are clean, technically, but they smell like a mix of lye whiskey and other people's regrets. You sit up, stretch your back until it pops, and swing your feet to the floor. The boards are cool under your toes, but only for a second. The sun's already heating up the room, creeping through the slats in the shuttered windows like it's got a grudge. You splash water on your face from the basin by the bed. It's murky, probably used by the last guest, or maybe even you yesterday, and you've just forgotten. You swish your mouth with a bit of it anyway, spit into a tin mug, and wipe your face on the same towel you used last night. It still smells faintly of rosewater and dust. Outside, the town stirs. You dress slowly like someone re-entering battle. Shirt, pants, boots. Every layer a step closer to rejoining the war against the environment. Downstairs, the saloon is already busy. There's a group of men at one table playing cards with a level of intensity usually reserved for life and death situations. Another man is passed out in the corner, hat over his face boots off and feet propped on a stool. You pray you don't have to smell them. The barkeep gives you a nod as you pass. He smells like cloves and sweat and has the kind of mustache that looks like it could filter whiskey if needed. You grab a biscuit from a tray and step outside. Immediately, the sun slaps you across the face. You saddle up again. You don't really need to leave town today, but staying too long in one place draws attention, and out here attention isn't always friendly. So you head out back to the trail. The horizon stretches ahead in all directions, the kind of emptiness that feels vast and eternal. By midday, you're sweating again. You stop by a creek, not to swim, there could be snakes, but to splash water on your neck and refill your canteen. You take your boots off and let your feet dangle in the shallows. The coolness bites at first, but then it settles into something close to bliss. You take a bar of soap from your saddlebag, the one from the bathhouse, and lather up your hands, forearms, face. You scrub behind your ears again, just in case. The water runs cloudy for a few seconds, then clears. You dry off in the sun and watch a dragonfly hover over the water like a tiny god with wings. Historians still debate how common it was for travelers to wash mid-journey like this. Some claim rivers were full of men doing exactly what you're doing. Others argue it was rare, reserved for those who had extra time, fewer enemies, or just really hated being grimy. What's certain, clean water was sacred, and this little creek feels like a cathedral. You move on after an hour. The land rolls gently, and the air smells of sagebrush and heat. Your horse breathes steadily beneath you. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cries, and you wonder what it must be like to never care how you smell. You ride through a patch of wind-blown dust and instantly regret not putting your kerchief back up. It gets in your teeth, your nose, your eyelashes. You spit wipe your eyes and mutter something unkind to the universe. Being clean out here is a full-time job. As evening falls, you set up camp near a cluster of cottonwoods. The light fades to a burnt orange, then soft purple. You build a fire, boil some beans, and chew in silence. Your hands are dirt-stained again. You rinse them quickly with the last of your clean water and promise yourself you'll find another stream tomorrow. You wipe your face with a cloth that smells like last week. Your body is already settling back into its usual state of mild grime. But tonight you're grateful. You got one more day than usual. One more day of semi-clean skin, minty aftertaste from old chewing leaves, and the ghost of rosewater behind your ears. You smile into the dark, because in the Wild West, that counts as luxury. You wake to the sound of coyotes yipping in the distance and the low groan of your own stomach, reminding you that canned beans don't count as breakfast or dinner. The fire has long since gone out, and the ashes are cold. You roll onto your side and feel your back protest every movement. The ground is hard. Your bedroll is thin. And your skin is officially back to trail texture. You scratch your chest absently and feel the now familiar crust of salt dried into your shirt from the sweat of yesterday. You stretch, rub your eyes, and reach for your canteen. It's lighter than it should be. Not good. You sit up and take stock. Clothes dusty, boots stiff, hat probably home to a spider or two by now. You shake it out, slap it against your leg, and pretend you didn't just see something scurry out. On the plus side, your hair feels okay, still a little soft. The ghost of bathhouse soap lingers like a memory of a better life. You stand and stretch again, each joint cracking like a fire starting in reverse. Time to get moving. There's a town a few miles ahead, not one you've been to before, but word on the trail said they have a barber shop that offers baths and shaves for a reasonable fee if you don't ask too many questions about the water. By mid-morning, you see the roofs appear on the horizon. The buildings are small, sun-bleached, and huddled close together, like they're trying to survive the heat as a group. A faded sign welcomes you to a place so forgettable, even the sign looks bored. You hitch your horse, tip your hat at a woman sweeping her porch, and make your way toward the barber pole spinning lazily in front of the shop. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of bay rum tonic and a hint of mildew. A man with a waxed mustache and a too clean apron looks up from his newspaper. "Well," he says, eyeing you, "you look like a man who's been arguing with the desert and losing." You grin. "I heard you give good shaves." He gestures toward the chair. "Sit down. Let's see what we can find under that dust." The chair creaks as you settle in. The headrest is too high, the footrest too short, but you don't care. You close your eyes as he begins to wrap a steaming towel around your face. It smells like heaven and vinegar. Steam seeps into your pores. For a moment, you forget where you are. When the towel is pulled away, the world feels a bit softer. He lathers your face with a brush that tickles, like it's apologizing for every scrape you've ever endured. Then comes the blade, sharp, slow, precise. You've never trusted a man this much with your neck. You feel the hair fall away. You hear it too, tiny scrapes like wind brushing across dry leaves. While he works, you glance in the mirror. There you are. Less dust, less beard, more person. He wipes your face clean and gives your cheeks a final slap with aftershave that smells like menthol and church pews. You exhale. You forgot how good this could feel. "Bath's out back," he says, handing you a towel. "Fire's still warm. Don't take too long. Next customer's in half an hour." You nod and head outside. The bath is rustic. Tin tub, bucket of hot water, another of cold. A sliver of soap sits on a wooden stool, looking more like an offering than a tool. You strip again. This time, the air hits your skin with less judgment. You pour water into the tub, testing the temperature until it's just right, then slide in with a sigh that feels like it comes from somewhere deep in your bones. You soak longer than you should. The water turns cloudy, then murky, then brown. You don't care. You soap every inch of yourself. Hair, ears, elbows, knees, the space between your toes, especially that. You rinse twice, just to be sure. You even scrape under your fingernails with the edge of the soap. You feel like a new man, or at least like an old man with new skin. Historians still argue over whether barbers were more valued for their shaves or their gossip. Some say they were the unofficial mayors of frontier towns, knowing everyone's secrets. Others say they just knew how to sharpen a blade and fake small talk. Either way, you're grateful for both. You step out of the bath and towel off. You put on your clothes freshly beaten against the rocks yesterday to remove the worst of the dust. They feel softer. You smell like soap. Your face is smooth. Your scalp feels like it's breathing. You pay the barber and walk back into the town square. You catch your reflection in the window of the general store. You blink. You look normal. Not fancy, not fine, but human. You buy a comb, a bar of soap, a small tin of tooth powder, luxury items, sure, but they fit in your saddlebag like they belong there. And for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like a walking dust storm with boots. You walk taller. People nod. You nod back. Even the sun feels less cruel. And when you ride out of town, it's with your head held higher, your skin feeling like skin again, and your spirit just a little less grimy. You ride into dusk with the wind at your back, a trail of dry road kicking up behind you, and a strange, lingering sensation on your cheeks, smoothness. Your jawline is no longer buried under grime and bristle, and your scalp still tingles from soap and hot water. It's unfamiliar, almost suspicious, like your body doesn't know how to handle being cared for. As the sun melts behind the hills, you feel the chill creep in, not sharp, but soft, like a whisper of winter. The desert drops in temperature faster than a poker player folds a bad hand. You pull your coat tighter, press your hat down, and find a spot to camp for the night. A narrow canyon with high stone walls and a soft patch of earth that's mostly free of burrs. Mostly. You build a fire with flint and kindling, the motions practiced and slow. Your hands still smell faintly of bay rum. The scent feels out of place out here, like fine china in a saloon, but you keep catching it on the wind and it makes you smile. It's not just about being clean anymore. It's about remembering you can be. You boil a tin of coffee. The grounds are bitter, but warm. You chew a hunk of jerky that's seen better months. And then you lean back, stare at the stars, and let your body process the day. You're still sore, still dusty under the collar and behind the knees, But something's different. You're not carrying the weight of dirt tonight. There's a difference between a little trail dust and a week's worth of unwashed exhaustion. And tonight, for once, you're closer to the former. You think back to stories you've heard around other campfires, stories about how some men in the West believed too much washing was dangerous, that bathing could open your pores and let illness in, that dirt was a kind of armor against the harshness of the land. And maybe there's some logic to that. After all, you've never seen a snake slip in the bath. But even those tough old-timers had a soft spot for a bar of soap when no one was looking. Historians still argue whether personal cleanliness in the Old West was an act of pride ritual or sheer necessity. Some suggest it was dictated by religion, cleanliness being next to godliness after all. Others point out the economic barrier. Only those with time and means could afford the luxury of washing often. But one thing's clear: when men bathed, they remembered it, not because of the water, but because of the feeling. You stoke the fire again. Toss a few pine needles into the flames for the scent, and you start to wonder what else you've forgotten. Not memories exactly, but sensations. The cool weight of fresh linen on clean skin. The feeling of wind through hair that isn't matted. The strange dignity of putting on socks that don't crunch when you bend them. It's not that you need to be fancy. You just want to feel human. You unroll your bedroll, shake it out, check for critters. Always check. And as you slide inside, the cloth touches your skin differently tonight. It's subtle, but real. Less friction, less grit. You curl onto your side and sigh, long and low. A breath not just of exhaustion, but of relief. Even the smells are different now. The firewood burns cleaner. Your horse nearby smells more like animal and less like sweat on sweat. Your own scent no longer competes with the wild. It blends. You're not just surviving tonight. You're resting. As you lie there, your mind drifts to the sound of water lapping against metal tubs, to the scent of soap and steam, to the sting of a straight razor, precise and calming, to the moment when dirt gives up its grip and something inside you releases too. You fall asleep that night faster than you have in weeks. No tossing, no twitching, no scratching at the back of your neck. Just one long breath and then silence. The desert breathes around you. The stars keep their watch. And you, cleaned and calm, drift into something close to peace. You wake at first light, not because something's wrong, but because something's still. The air is unusually quiet. Even the birds seem to be sleeping in. You stretch, surprised to find that your back doesn't creak quite as much as usual. That faint trace of bay rum still lingers at your temples like a whisper of civilization you brought into the wilderness with you. You sit up slowly. There's dust on your boots again, of course. A small spider web across your saddle. But your skin, it's still smooth in places. Your face feels clean. Even the backs of your knees haven't turned to leather yet. And that's something. You make your coffee slowly this morning, savoring the stillness. The ground smells richer when you're clean. Or maybe you just notice things more when you're not fighting through a haze of your own odor. The cup warms your hands as the sun climbs, slicing through the canyon wall and turning everything gold for a few brief minutes. You saddle up and ride out. Today, you have no particular destination, just a road, a map in your head, and the thought that maybe, just maybe, somewhere ahead lies another town with a bathhouse, a bottle of soap, and someone who won't look at you like you're part of the furniture. By noon, your shirt is stuck to your spine again, but not the way it used to be. It's more of a cling than a choke. The sweat comes slower when your skin can actually breathe. You pause by a grove of cottonwoods, tie your horse to a post someone left behind, and find a narrow stream trickling nearby. You kneel and wash your face again, just because you can. The water's cold, but refreshing. You let it drip down your neck and soak into your collar. You splash a little more under your arms, rub your palms together, rinse the grit off your fingers. The soap is gone, but the instinct remains. A few months ago, you would have drunk straight from this stream without blinking. Today you pause, consider it, and pull a tin cup from your saddlebag instead. Call it caution, call it growth, call it hygiene. Not far down the road, you pass a small farmstead. A woman with a sun-wrinkled face and strong forearms waves from her porch. A boy runs barefoot through the dirt chasing chickens like it's his job. The entire yard smells like corn manure and fresh bread. You catch the scent and feel your stomach twist. You haven't had fresh bread in weeks. You tip your hat and move on, but the smell stays with you. Later that afternoon, you reach a crossroads marked by a leaning signpost and a rattling windmill. One road leads west, toward the next town on your internal map. The other, a dead end, just open range, scattered trees, and a distant barn that's half collapsed. You take the dead end, not because it's easier, but because it's quieter. You set up camp beneath a massive cottonwood that hums gently in the breeze. The wind moves through its leaves like whispers through paper. You unsaddle your horse, give it a rub down, and then sit by the tree's base, watching shadows stretch across the dirt. There's a small tin mirror in your saddlebag, bent at the corner, cloudy in the middle. You pull it out and glance at your reflection. You barely recognize yourself. Not because you look different, but because you look like someone who's taken care. There's a softness to your eyes, a subtle lift to your brow. Even your beard, what's grown back, is tidier than usual, like it remembers the razor that trimmed it. And suddenly it hits you. This whole past week you've been chasing clean, but what you found was respect. Historians still argue whether grooming in the West was about health or dignity. Some say it was performative only for Sundays, funerals, and weddings. Others insist it was personal, a way to preserve the idea of oneself amid the dust heat and slow erosion of frontier life. You don't care who's right. You just know it matters. You take out the last of your tooth powder Dab a little on your finger and scrub gently. It tastes like chalk and mint and determination. You comb your hair. You wipe your boots. You shake out your shirt, hang it on a low branch, and sit shirtless beneath the sky, letting the last light of day settle on your shoulders. You breathe in. You breathe out. You feel right. That night, you eat slowly. Jerky dried apples, the last of your beans. Every bite feels deliberate. You clean your tin cup before packing it away. You fold your bedroll before lying down. Even the way you settle onto the ground is different now, less a collapse, more a ritual, because being clean has become a mindset, not a moment. You drift to sleep with the sound of rustling leaves above you. Your face turned toward the stars, and your hands smelling faintly of soap you used 2 days ago. And even though tomorrow promises sweat and dust and sore muscles, you'll still have this. You'll remember that for a little while, in a corner of the Wild West, you walked clean. The sun climbs again, indifferent and eternal, just as it always does out here. You stir under your blanket, eyes still closed, sensing warmth before light gravity, before sound. There's no rooster, no whistle, no alarm clock. Just a shift in the wind and the tug of the day calling you forward. Your bedroll creaks as you sit up, joints waking slowly, like they've decided to forgive you one last time. You rub your face and notice something. You don't flinch. No crust, no grit, just skin. Soft, plain human skin. There's dust in your hair again, of course. The West doesn't let you go without a souvenir. But it feels less like defeat today and more like an accent part of the rhythm. You stretch, breathe in, and feel the trace of cleanliness still clinging to you, stubborn like hope. You strike camp with care. Fold the blanket square. Rinse the tin cup. Pack the saddlebag, just so. These small acts, meaningless to the rushing world, have become your anchor. A clean shirt, a wiped knife, a comb run through tangled hair. They are your way of saying, I'm still here. You mount up and head south. The trail narrows into a canyon, steep walls of red rock on either side, casting long shadows that smell like clay and shade. You ride without speaking, because there's no one to hear, just the steady clip of hooves and the quiet hush of wind smoothing the dust. There's an old stagecoach stop an hour ahead, abandoned now. Nothing but a roof, a dry well, and 2 posts where horses used to wait. You tie your own mount beside them just for tradition's sake and step into the shade. The air inside smells faintly of old leather and sun-scorched wood. There's a bench. You sit, and you think. You think about the first time you noticed how bad you smelled. Really noticed. Maybe it was back in that boom town when a schoolmarm gave you a look that could have killed mildew. Or maybe it was later when you caught your own scent in the collar of your coat and gagged before finishing breakfast. Or maybe it's now when you realize that you don't notice it anymore, not because it's returned, but because it's gone. There's a stillness in being clean, a peace. You pull out the comb again. It's scratched and missing 2 teeth, but it works. You run it through your hair, slowly, deliberately. The motion feels like prayer, like ceremony. A ritual performed not for anyone else, but for yourself. You wipe your hands with a cloth from your pack. It's stained, worn thin in the middle, but still smells of the soap you used 2 nights ago. It's amazing how far a small bar can carry you. Historians still argue over whether frontier cleanliness was more about status or survival. Did you wash to impress the preacher or to keep lice at bay? Was shaving about health or hiding the gray? Did men carry cologne to court women or just to cover the fact they hadn't touched water in a month? You suspect it was all of the above, because out here, nothing ever has just one purpose. You remember the barber's hand on your shoulder, firm, steady, oddly comforting. You remember the sting of tonic, the scrape of the razor. You remember the way your reflection surprised you, as if you'd stumbled across someone you hadn't seen in years. And now, with the trail stretching before you and the past rolling behind you like tumbleweed, you realize something else. Cleanliness was never the goal. It was the path, the excuse to pause, to breathe, to reset. You leave the station after an hour, not because you need to, but because staying too long in a place without people feels like haunting. The road feels softer beneath your boots. Your saddle doesn't creak as much. The sun, though merciless, seems to tolerate your presence more today. By twilight, you find another stream. Not much, just a trickle, but it's enough. You crouch beside it, cup your hands, and rinse your face. You don't even think about it. It's instinct now, like eating, like tying your boots, like hope. You bed down beneath the stars again. The sky is velvet. The air is cool. You run your fingers across your cheek and smile. Tomorrow the road will come for you again. The heat, the dust, the slow erasure of every effort. But tonight, you have this. Your breath is steady. Your skin is yours. You are a man in a world too wild to notice, too busy to care, and too beautiful to leave. And tomorrow you'll chase the next bathhouse like a gambler chasing luck. Because even out here, especially out here, clean matters. The fire has long gone out now, and the last embers of your trail ride flicker gently behind your eyes. The dust has settled. The saddle lies empty, and you're finally stretched out beneath that quiet, watchful sky. The stars above don't ask anything of you. They've been here long before your horse ever walked the earth, and they'll remain long after the last hoofprint fades. Their soft shimmer is slower than thought, slower than time, slower than the lingering ache in your shoulders. You let yourself fall into their rhythm. The breeze is gentle, brushing across your skin like cool linen, wrapping around your face, easing its way into your collar. The smells of the day horse leather, a trace of smoke, melt into the background. What lingers now is the memory of soap, a quiet, fading sweetness that tells you for at least one day you lived a little softer. You shift slightly, your blanket tucked just right, the ground firm beneath your back, but no longer unfriendly. There's a quiet hum in the night. Maybe crickets, maybe just the earth breathing under you. You breathe with it. Out here there's no clock, no curtain to draw, no fanfare to mark the end, just the hush of the land, the promise of morning, and the echo of your own clean hands folded across your chest. So let your eyes grow heavy, let your breath slow, and let the last image fade of you, riding through a world that never once stopped for you, but gave you just enough water, just enough soap, and just enough grace to remind you that even in the Wild West, peace is possible.